Good morning, third graders. It's good to see you guys. It's Monday. Yay! And we have one more week before spring break, so hang in there, guys. We have just 5 more days if you can include today. We have 5 days until spring break. So let's keep it up the good work and let's take a look at our DMA for today. Some of you have been really good about going to your discussions and putting in your discussions for your videos. So good job. Keep it up. I'm really impressed with you guys, making sure that you do what you need to do. So keep it up. So let's take a look at, we are on week 24. So this is week 24, and we're going to be doing, today is Monday, so this is day 1 of our DMA. So let's take a look at our first problem. Our first problem is 394. So this is our part. And we have added to that, we want to add 474. So 396, I may have said that wrong. 396 plus 474, that's the other part. And we want to find our total. When we take those two parts and put them together, we want to find the total sum, all of it put together. So they call that the sum, and it stands for the total of all the parts put together. So let's take a look at 396 plus 474. 396 is really close to, yes, you said 400, you would be correct. Now, one way to think about this is a strategy, is take these 4 from that part and add them to the 396. And if I add 4 to 396, what do I get? 400. And then if I take those 4 out, I'm left with 470. And this makes it so much easier for me to just add those hundreds here from the 400 onto those 400s here in the 470. So 400 plus 400 is 800. Since I added that 4 onto 396, I don't have any 1s or 10s to worry about. The 10s or 1s are going to be 0, so I'm just going to take this 70 and add 470 to 400 makes 870. So that's my sum. Now, if I were to do this as a regular problem, I could take my hundreds, I could take my tens, 90 and 70, and I could take my ones, and I could add them each separately. So 300 plus 400 is 700. 90 plus 1 more 10 would give me 100. That would leave this with 60. So 90, 10 makes 100, plus 60 makes 160. Notice I have 1 more 100 here. So take that 700 and add 1 more 100. Since I was able to make 10 tens, remember 10 tens makes 100? Well, I have 9 tens and 7 tens. So definitely a new 100 being added there. And 6 and 4 makes a new 10. So when I put that all together, I have 800. 6 and 10 makes 70. Again, no 1s, so 870. I could also line up my place values. I could take this 396 and this 474, add them together. 6 and 4 makes 10. I carry that 10 to my tens place. The 90 and a 10 makes 100, and this would be 170. So I'm going to carry that 100 here to the hundreds place. And 400 plus 300 is 700, plus 1 more that I carried over from the tens place would be 800. So again, does not matter. There's 3 different ways strategies that you can use right there to help you find the sum of 396 and 474. Now, if you were to use subtraction to check, you would take the 870. One of these 2 parts, doesn't matter which one, and it should end up being the other part. So let's check and see if that happens. I'm going to borrow a 10 because I don't have any 10s here to subtract. And 10 minus 4 is 6. I can't subtract 60 and then subtract 70 from that 60. Can't take 70 away from 60. So I borrow 100. That leaves me with 16 tens, or 160. 160 minus 70 is going to be 90, or 16 tens minus 7 tens is 9 tens. And 7 hundreds minus 4 hundreds is 3 hundreds. See how I was able to get this other part when I subtracted. So if you are checking using subtraction, remember you start with your total. You take one of the parts, subtract it from the whole, and you should be able to see that it's going to end up being whatever the other part of your subtraction problem was. All right, let's take a look at the next problem. It is a fraction problem. Now, you'll notice that you have 2 here in the denominator. Some of you might think that it would be 4, but remember, we are talking about this as being one whole triangle, and that's why I labeled that here. And this is also one whole triangle, and each one of those squares, hello, Miss Anamio. So each one of these squares is a whole square, and each part is 1/2 of that square. So I have 2 whole squares, and each one of those is broken up into half. So that tells me that I have half and a half together. And when I put half and a half together, what do we remember about half and a half? Right. 2 halves makes 1 whole, correct? So I have 1 whole here for this square. Now, when I look at the other square, my other square is also broken up into half pieces. So I have another 2 halves. And now that's also going to be 1 whole square. So if you notice, and then let me zoom out here, I have used my strips to help me visualize this. So here's my 1 whole square broken up into 2 halves. Here's my other 1 whole square broken up into 2 halves. Well, how many halves do I have? Well, remember your numerator tells you how many of these parts are you counting. Well, I'm counting my half parts. I have 1, 2, 3, 4. I have 4 half parts. So I have 4 halves in 2 whole. So 2 whole is the same if I were to cut those wholes up into 2 equal pieces. Each one of those would be 2 halves, and 2 halves and 2 halves are 4 halves. So what does that look like as an addition sentence? 2 halves plus 2 halves is still halves. We're still working with halves, but how many of those halves do I have? I have 4 of those halves. There's 4 halves. Now, if I were to add another 1 whole here, how many halves would I have then? Well, let's think about that. If I take another whole square and I break it up into half, I have another 2 halves. How many halves would I have now? If you said 6 halves, you would be correct because I have another 1/2 that I can add here, which would be 5 halves, and another half that I could add here, which now makes 6 halves. So good job if that's what you were thinking. Way to go. Before I move on to my next problem, I just want to stop here and talk about what the discussion problem for today is going to be. And it goes back to our problem 1. So let's take a look at that. What I want you to do is practice some rounding today. So I want you to round each one of these add-ins. These are called add-ins. What are they called? Add-ins. I want you to take each one of these add-ins and round it to the nearest 100. Okay? remember what I just said. For your discussion question today, I want you to take 396, 474, round them to the nearest hundred, and see what your sum comes up to. Now, it should be close to 870 if we are estimating or rounding correctly. So just remember that. I wanted to just take time to do that before I forget to mention that. I'm going to zoom into our problem here. And this one's a little tough to see because it's very small. But I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in here. You can see that my straw, they started the straw at the 0, so we don't have to worry about not knowing where to start the ruler. We know that we have 8 whole inches, but then from here to here, there's also a little bit more. Now, what is that little bit more? Well, if you can see that it's right here at the quarter mark. So it's 8 whole inches and it's 1/4 more of another inch. It's not exactly 8 inches and it's not exactly 9. It's 8 whole inches with 1/4 more added to it. So basically, we're looking at our hole as here, and this is part of that hole right there, up to that point. So we have 8 whole inches and 1/4, 8 1/4 inches. And we're just going to add that here because it says how many inches, so we need to put that measurement in there. I'm going to zoom back out, and let's take a look at our last set of problems. These are related division and multiplication facts. Again, they're not equal to each other, but they are related to each other. So when I take these 20 objects and I put them into 5 groups, equal groups, right? How many do I get in each group? Well, I could, again, if I know my multiplication facts, if 5 times blank equals 20, then if I know what my missing factor is, then I could put that in there. If I don't, I could just take 2 at a time, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, and finally 20. Well, when I divided these into equal groups, I was able to get 4 in each group. So my missing factor would be 4. Now, same thing for 18 divided by 9. If I know that 9 times blank equals 18, well, how many groups of 9 could I make to give me 18? Or how many groups, if I were to put 9 in a group and 9 in another group, 9 plus 9 is? That's right, 18. So how many groups of 9 did I need to make this 18? Well, I could also use repeated subtraction, right? Repeated subtraction would also work. So if I take these 18, take away 9, I have 9. If I start with these 9 and take away another 9, I have 0. Now, how many groups of 9 did I subtract to get to 0? Well, I was at 2 groups of 9. And finally, the last one is 36 objects. So I have 36 objects. I'm breaking it up into 4 equal groups. So 4 groups with blank in each group gives me 36. Again, this is a really good reason why you need to know your multiplication facts, so that you don't have to do a lot of modeling. You already start to understand how this works. So if I take 36 objects, put it into 4 equal groups, or I could also count by 4s depending on how you wanted to do it. If you know your 4s really well, you could say 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, 24, 28, 32, and finally 36. So how many groups of 4 was I able to count to get to 36. 9. Or I could start taking the 36 objects and putting them into 4 groups. So I have 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, 18, 20, 24, 24, 26. Now I'm getting really close to this 36, so I think, well, I guess I could do 2 more. 26, 28, 30, 32, 34, and finally 36, you have 2, so that would be 9 in each one. I added 2 here. So I have 9 in each group. So 9 plus 9 is 18. 9 plus 9 is 18. And 18 and 18 is 36. So I have 9 in each group. So 4 times 9 equals 36. And 36 divided by 4 equals 9. So fact families are very important in your understanding for multiplication and division. Those are your problems for today. We will be working with fractions also today, equivalent fractions today. So this is considered an equal fraction, but we're not working with wholes necessarily. But don't forget that your discussion question today is round each number, round each one of these numbers to the nearest 100, and add to see if your estimated sum comes out to be close to the actual sum. This is our actual sum for today. So can't wait to see you during small group today, and have a wonderful day.